Good morning, everybody. This presentation is about Acre, a code management system written by APLers for APLers. The reason why there are two names is Phil Last is the poor sod who has implemented it on behalf of Carlisle Group, and I'm the one who produced an endless list of feature requests and bug reports. Acre was put into existence because the FlipDB development team, the international FlipDB development teams, a couple of years ago used to exchange workspaces between the large amount of people involved. That was Paul Mansour, Phil, and me. And as it turns out, even with 3 people, this is not a desirable approach. You run into all sorts of trouble. And Paul came up with the idea to support this by software. Now, I don't think there is any need to reason why a code management system is useful for a team. For the very simple reason, many APLers working on the same project, that results in chaos. I'm not talking about those projects where maybe 3 or 4 people work on the same project, but they have separate areas. So they load a workspace, work on that workspace interacts somehow with another workspace. That is relatively easy to manage. But it's a very different story when 4 people work on exactly the same workspace. And at one stage they need to reintegrate their changes into the same thing. Without software support, you are in trouble. Surprisingly, code management, for some people, code management systems are also useful even if you are working as a lonely wolf or you establish an application at home for your own purposes. And over time, more and more people realize that. So these days, when in, say, the Python community or the Java community or whatever, when you ask people in an audience who's using a code management system, then probably 95% of the people in the audience would raise their hands. And the 5% that wouldn't are probably very young. I found these quotes on Stackflow. This was not language dependent. It was a general question. I have no idea what the guy was working on, which language he was using. And somebody answered that pretty much is the essence of that. Now, not surprisingly, in the APL community, we are different, right? We are always different. On Sunday, in the workshop, I asked who is actually using code management systems, and if I remember correctly, there were a couple of arms raised, but actually it was a single arm because all the guys were from SimCorp. Maybe nobody from APL Italiana was in. So it's an uncommon thing to do in the APL community still, obviously. So why should I use version control even if I'm not working on a team? Well, first of all, you might make a mistake. As long as you haven't saved your workspace, that doesn't matter, you can reload the workspace. But when you have the workspace and you have no version control system, it's not that easy, or maybe impossible, if you don't care about backups. In a code management system, you just revert to the latest version or whatever version you are interested in. Of course, it also is sort of a backup, not a real backup. A real backup should be somewhere else or on the cloud or whatever. You can store multiple versions for all sorts of reasons. Experimental, the current thread, where you have to do debugging, new development with new features, which is going to be a major release, whatever. You can check version differences. In particular, when more than one guy is doing the debugging, you need to cooperate. You can prove something. For example, did the fix I put in yesterday really break the code somewhere else? It's easy to prove if you have a code management system, right? You can review the history, typically to blame somebody for something. You can do reporting, who did what, when, where. You can do all sorts of experiments. No, you are not commenting code, rather the opposite. You are not commenting out code anymore when you use a version control system, because there is no point. You have the old version at your fingertips anyway, so you just delete the stuff and it's gone. As a compromise, you can put a comment on the one you are just about to change, but delete anything that is older than that version. So I tend now to delete everything that is not needed anymore. It's blurring matters, and that's all there is to say. How is a code management system in APL supposed to track changes? Well, there is the function editor. And the function editor has a callback called fix something, I believe. So that's easy. You attach a function to that, and then you can track the changes and take care of them. Unfortunately, there is also the opportunity that the user can copy code into the workspace, or fix a function, or fix a script. And the code management system has no idea about this, and there is no mechanism to track that. In which case, you have to tell the code management system about the change. And there's also the opportunity to erase code, and if you use the system command, the code management system wouldn't know either. So instead, you're advised to use a user command erase, which will remove it not only from the workspace, but also inform the code management system about the erase. And luckily, there's also a restore. So if you have erased something by accident, even if you haven't checked in yet, you still can restore it locally. We will see this all in practice, of course. Now, there are two different approaches to use Acre. And I'm demonstrating in the first practical session to use it locally. That means we don't have a database or repository somewhere in the background, typically in the cloud. We just use it on the local machine for our own sake. In such a project, the workflow would look something like create the project locally, open the project, meaning getting the stuff into a clear workspace, start working on it, consolidate, which means that what in Acre is called change files is all going into the local database, so to speak, and you restart the whole cycle. The advantages of that is you have the history, you can compare at any point your current version in the workspace with the version you started from or any version in between. You have an insurance against all sorts of problems. I'm coming to this in detail with the next slide. You don't need to save a workspace. There's no point in saving workspaces with Acre. And because of that, you always start with a clean workspace. No damaged workspaces. You might be familiar with load workspace and it Apple cores immediately. That is nice. The insurance, the developer's obstacles. Of course, we all know about Apple cores, right? And it's very annoying when you spend an hour's work on something and then you want to save. And the save command is actually triggering the Apple core, and you can kiss goodbye to your changes. But there are so many other obstacles we all tend to forget. We all tend to forget the bad things, right? We prefer to remember the good things. We all know that Dyalog has stopped working, right? You don't even get an Apple core. You don't get anything at all. So there's nothing to look into for Dyalog. Or as it happens to me at least 5 times over the last 30 years, you keep typing, you look up. Oh, where's my session? APL just disappeared into nowhere land. That defeated me at least 20 times during my career. I built up a very smart quad trap. For example, a function which catches 0, meaning all traps, and then I forget to define the function, or I make a typo and the name is wrong, and then you end up with a value error on it, which is trapped, which causes a value error, which is trapped. And machines these days are so fast, there is no way that you can get an interrupt in. So your workspace is gone. You can kill the process and restart. And if you haven't saved before, well, another nice way are timer callbacks. which might occur so fast because of all sorts of mistakes that you can't get in. You can simply forget to save. I just remember an additional one. John might hit the wrong function key. He has off on one function key. Do you still have that?
No, not anymore.
Not anymore. Okay. Dyalog may hang, and that might not even be Dyalog's fault. If Dyalog calls word and waits for word returning the control, and it doesn't do that, nothing is going to happen. Or it's because it's inside an external call or something like that, which means it looks as if you can do something like save or off or whatever, but whatever you try, you get that message, meaning, no, you can't. And finally, you might end up with a damaged workspace, which occasionally can mean that you can load the workspace, but you can't do anything with it. You can't copy from it, you can't save it. All this is passed when you use a code management system like Acre, because if it happens, forget it, restart, and there you are. Now, the way Acre is organizing stuff is it starts with a project library. This is just a simple folder. In that folder, there have to be two projects, Acre and Conga, which themselves are Acre managed projects. That is needed to get things started. And the project library is identified by one of two ways. By default, Acre is looking for the WS ID and investigates the path and assumes, for example, when you load the Acre Workspace, it assumes that the project library is the parent of the current workspace ID. Or, if that is not true, you can just define an explicit path and tell Acre where the project library is located. Acre always creates a couple of files and folders. Let's assume that the project name is foo. Then there will be a file called foo.codefile, which is the code you start with, which won't change until you execute the consolidate command, or when it is with something in the background you upload. And there will be a folder called foo.changes that keeps a component file for each object you are going to change or to delete. And there is a folder called files, where you can put all the files which belong to the project. Typical examples are icons, help files, whatever. Meaning that, of course, they are also Acre managed, and there can be different versions. So you can, for example, restore not only an old version of the workspace, but also the files which belong to that version of the workspace. Time for a practical session. What we are going to do is we create a project library. Normally we would download Acre. That's not necessary. It's already on my machine. So I should mention at that point in time, if you want to get Acre, you can download it from the APL Wiki. Go to the APL Wiki, enter Acre in the search box, and you will get a couple of pages. The main page contains the download link. Acre is free. I should mention that. Acre is free, so you can just use it. You load the Acre workspace, you create a project, and you start working. So the first step is to load the Acre workspace. There it is. For the first approach, I am going to create a namespace called defense, all in uppercase. I jump into that namespace, and I copy John's wonderful collection of dynamic functions into that namespace. It's on the workspace path as part of the Dyalog standard installation. So just a copy defense will work, or should work. And we check whether we got what we were looking for. There's plenty of stuff now in the workspace. We jump back into the root, and we are ready to create a project. Now this project is specified by two parameters. The first one is the name of the project, that is defense within the quotes. The second one defines what is actually going into the project. In this case, I specify the namespace explicitly. I've just created and populated. You can instead create what we call a root project. Then you would just specify the hash symbol. And that would mean everything in the workspace but Acre and Conga. They are not going to be part of that project because Acre is smart at that point. This one is just using one namespace. Phil will later demonstrate how a root project can be created. That tells us that it has read the ini file, that it created the code file and populated with a large amount of items, much more than we actually saw here. This is because there are sub-namespaces which themselves contain variables and functions. And there we are. We can start working. So let's create a function. When Acre saves an object for the first time, it makes that very obvious for a good reason, because that might a message something along the lines, Acre is not able to manage that project because it wasn't asked to do so, something like that. So the first message is particularly important, and therefore it's outstanding. Note here that in the function name, we use APL characters, in particular the nasty del underbar, which is causing all sorts of trouble when you create file names with this kind of characters involved. And a third one. And now I realize I made a mistake. I don't want the third one. So how can I get rid of that? As mentioned earlier, there's a user command, an Acre user command called arrays you can use to get rid of it. At which point I use the menu bar, which Acre has populated when I open the project, in order to open the location of the change files. Location change folder. These are the three objects I've changed. That was the ordinary change, nothing particular special about this. This was the one where we used APL characters in the function name. And as you can see, they are encoded in a special way because we can't represent APL characters in the Windows file system. So we have to do something about this, and Acre is doing that. This is the one we originally created, but then deleted. That turns up with the del extension at the end. I also want to make a change to one of the functions in the namespace. And finally, I'm going to crash the interpreter. This is not a Dyalog bug. I copied memory in the interpreter from one place to another where I shouldn't do this. APL realizes that and said, oh no, I'm not going to continue, so I Apple core. So it's a deliberate crash. But as you may have noticed, I didn't save the workspace. I load the Acre Workspace again, and I open my project. And this time, it tells a little bit more. It not only tells us that it opens a local project, it also tells us that there are a couple of things it has brought into the workspace, redefined 3 of them. The one with the APL characters, the change to assign, and the function without anything special. It also mentioned that there is one thing that got erased. Is that really true? Let's check. In the assign function, I did this, and the change is still there. So that is proof that whether the interpreter crashes or not, it doesn't matter. Your changes are always there. I was too quick. That's going to be interesting. I tried 45 minutes to find a bug yesterday. It has nothing to do with Acre at all. This thing, this user command is using a third-party tool, compiles the code I started from in one temporary file, and compiles the code I have in the workspace right now, and then compares the 2 versions with each other. And it popped up saying I can't find the files. And tracing through, I can find the files, they are there. So I have no idea what's going on, and we decided to ignore it and to fix it in the morning because I was tired. Today in the morning, I looked into the problem, everything worked. I didn't change anything. So whether that works now or not, I have no idea. It worked. So this is the workspace, which is why it says latest, and this is where I started from. You see the changes, and with F8 and compare it, I can step through all the changes I've made. It's a very simple mechanism that allows you, when you think you are ready, to make up your mind. Is it really ready for being checked in or putting into production or whatever? Or if you have code reviewing established in your company, to sit together at that kind of comparison tool and look, do you agree with what I did? Is it understandable what I did? It is maintainable, whatever. You can also use another user command related to Acre, not part of Acre itself, but related to Acre, to compare what is in the workspace with any of the changes saved before. Whenever you change something, another component is added to its component file. And you get the information when that did happen. Not very useful information right now because there are just a couple of minutes in between. But when it is a different day, that is a different story. And you get something like this. Acre comes with all sorts of different reports. Provides all of them. Not necessarily all of them are actually populated. In this case, we get just 2 parts. What was changed in the workspace and which files got deleted. We will later see a more elaborate report after we've created some conflicts. When I'm sure that everything I've done is okay, and I want to incorporate my change files into the code base, I can use the Consolidate command and advise it to get rid of all the change files. There are no change files anymore, and I have a clear point to start with. I need to execute this actually if I want to upload that project now into the cloud, which is exactly what I'm going to do. The command put project puts the project onto the default server. What is the default server is defined in an ini file. In this case, it points to the APL Wiki, and on the APL Wiki is running a piece of software called Acre Server, which communicates via TCP/IP with our APL session. and receives our project. I don't know how fast the internet connection is. Here it's pretty much the same as usual, so it's slow. So it will take a while. It's about 5 megabyte data we need to transfer up to the server. So, while we are waiting for the upload, I go back to the slides. There is a change in strategy now. We've so far worked with a local repository. What we are doing now is we work with a central repository, meaning that somewhere in the cloud there is an Acre server running and waiting to communicate with us. And we may have 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever number of local copies to work with. Now, that is a slightly different scenario. We would expect certain things to be added to the way Acre works. It still is acting as a kind of backup. It still has the history, of course. It is also reporting properly. But now it comes also to merging and branching. Branching meaning that when you reach a certain stage of development and you decide that is going to be shipped to the customer as version, say, 2.0, then normally what happens is you freeze that version somewhere to be able to go back in time. But you also start working on debugging that version. That's what your customer expects you to do. And you take another copy of it, which is used to become version 2.1 or maybe 3.0, whatever. And that mechanism is usually called branching. Merging is about solving conflicts, but also to bring branches back together later on. So you also expect Acre to do something about conflicts and supporting you in case of a conflict. The workflow is now that you ask the server for the project, you check out, you start working on it. Occasionally you might be interested in incorporating changes made by other developers in order to catch up with what they are doing. You carry on with your own development. And finally, you manage conflicts if there are any, and you check in your own code. And optionally, you add a tag, typically a version number or a remark that later helps you identifying the stage of that check-in. And then the whole cycle naturally restarts unless the software is dead anyway. So this is a second practical session where the Acre server in the background is used. The Acre server is actually running on the APL Wiki. It's a relational database management system. It doesn't matter where it is. We only need to know the IP address. You can download it from the APL Wiki. It is as free as the Acre client software. And I should mention that it never forgets anything. Even if you try to delete something, it doesn't delete anything. It just marks it as being deleted. Right. So I hand over to Phil, meaning that I press a shortcut which changes pretty much everything. We see an APL session with a black background. That's Phil's preferred way to work, and he's taking over.
Thank you, Kai. Okay. Right. Okay. I'm just going to load the workspace to begin with. And I'll show you what's in it. Basically, it's very simple. There's 2 namespaces, each a separate project, and fairly simple. Conga is as supplied, but we've put it into a project. It's got a couple of namespaces in there. And Acre is, we've just got a bunch of methods and another namespace. On disk in my library, I have the four projects: Acre, Conga, and 2 others, which are they display the help system when we need it. I'm going to create a project. I'm actually going to create the same project that you've already seen, only I'm going to do it a slightly different way. I've copied it directly into the root rather than creating a namespace to put it into. So it's exactly as it is supplied, with functions scattered around the root of the name of the workspace. 197 functions, 64 operators, plus the 2 namespaces, notes and scripts. Everything is all in the root. Notes contains lots of variables, scripts contains lots of variables, and now to turn it into an Acre project, we just do create project as before, defins, only this time instead of specifying a particular namespace, we just say the root. That's everything there is. And it's not going to let me. Well, it will, but it advises me against it because it's detected that there's already a defins project on the in the server. It's suggesting I could give it another name, or I could just carry on and it will be solely local. Instead of that, I'm going to abandon the idea and download the one that's already there. Just to show you again, we have 4 projects in my library. If I get the project defins, we're going to download the same 5.5 megabytes. Hopefully it should take a bit less time this time. The download speed should be rather faster than the upload. And yeah. What I'll end up with is a project identical in my library as the one that already existed in Kai's, except there may be minor differences if he's continued developing since he uploaded the project in the first place. All I will get was what he uploaded, obviously, and I'm just going to start working on it straight away, and consequently we'll have differences between our 2 versions. And rather than, I'll just show you that it actually does exist. There it is. We've got 5 projects in the library now, and it is actually open, but I'm just going to close it and reload the workspace, start cleanly, and open the project. Whoops, best with a okay. So we have the project there, and we have, rather than everything in the root, we've got everything in the namespaces. We better look what they are. Yep, as expected, we've got the defins namespace in there, but we've also got an Acre instance, Acre defins, which is our way into the various methods. Sorry, let's. Yes, I'm going to change something. And save it. Okay. Straight away, I'm now building up a difference between my copy and what's on the server. And up here we have a menu which is created on opening the project, and I'm going to look in my change folder, and there we have a change file called defins.cond, which is the operator I just changed. So if I actually undo that change, and it disappears from the change folder. So in fact, if we look at it, it's no longer changed. We're back to where we were. I can erase the thing, and we get a new file up here with the Del extension, exactly the same as the previous one, but with the Del there, it's actually saved the contents of the function, the operator, but it's disappeared from the workspace. The reason for that is that when we next upload, we want to be telling Acre that this thing is missing. It's no good just erasing it from the workspace. We need to tell Acre that so that it can delete it or flag it as deleted in the database. I can in fact restore it anyway, and it's back exactly as before, and we have no record of it in the change folder. I change it again. That's not what I meant to do, but I'll do it anyway. Edit something else. Okay. I'm going to change another thing which I believe you might have seen before. No, that's not what I want to do either. So another change, that's changed. We've got two changes, two change files in the change folder, and all I'm going to do now is upload. Spelt wrong, never mind. And that's done. It's uploaded. I have no files in my change folder. And before I do off, I'll just show you Acre report. I might as well just report all. So this will tell us everything that I've done, and it's nothing because I've just checked in, nothing to report. Everything in my library is now exactly as it was on the server, and that's me. Okay, Kai?
So I go back to my own session. As we can see, the upload has worked in the meantime and was actually in the meantime even overwritten by Phil's upload attempt. What I'm going to do is I start working on the function sieve, and I do something stupid here and save the change. And I say off. I pretend to restart a new cycle by loading the Acre Workspace, opening the defense project. We can see that sieve got changed. I can ask for a report, and it will tell me what I've done locally. It will tell me what wasn't updated yet, and it will also tell me that there is going to be a conflict. The last line says, upload conflicts, can't upload the change I made to sieve for the very simple reason it was changed since I've uploaded by a certain fill. So I have a problem here. Now I could do the upload anyway. What Acre would do is it would upload anything that is not causing a conflict and report the problem on sieve. Whether you are happy with that or not depends, of course, on all sorts of parameters. And frankly, we are still discussing whether that is a good behavior or something we should make configurable. The alternative would simply be that if you try to upload something and there is a conflict, that Acre wouldn't do anything at all and say, no, you have to care about the conflict first and then you can carry on. Philosophical matter, it depends on feedback whether we are going to change that or not. At the moment it would upload, so rather than trying to achieve that, let's do it the other way around. I download all the changes made by Phil. Close the project and open it again. And now I've incorporated everything but the change made by Phil, because the download is also stopping me from overwriting my own changes for the very same reason. There is a conflict. So I have to solve the conflict first. The default behavior of Acre is that it just puts up 3 edit windows, and I can toggle around by pressing Control-Tab, which highlights the changes, the differences between them, which is pretty sufficient for a small function. There is no need for anything else. However, if you have a large class with 3,000 lines and the change takes place in the last line, you wouldn't even notice. So if you deal with this kind of object, that approach wouldn't work properly. But there is an escape route. You can just specify a certain ini entry which calls or names a certain function, including its path, and that function would be able to use third-party tools like CompareIt to solve your conflict. And you can do in that APL function whatever you like. In my case, I'm not interested in this one. I'm not interested in this one. They are read-only anyway, but this is the one I have control over, my own one, and I'm just changing it. The change will tell Acre, I've checked everything. I'm certain that my change should overrule Phil's change. So I'm in charge for that. And now I'm able to upload all my changes, including Sieve. And there we are. That's all there is to say regarding Acre itself. I would like to mention one more thing, tool integration. At the moment, there are 2 tools, Fire and the class called Compare Simple, available on the APL Wiki for download, which actually take Acre into account. Fire, for example, when in a workspace you change an object and you save the new version, then Fire would investigate. For example, if it is a script, it would investigate whether that script was managed by Salt, and if it is Salt, then it would take care of that. If it is not managed by Salt and there is an Acre project open, or even if only Acre is in the workspace, it would call a an Acre method called setChange and tell Acre that the damn thing was changed by the means of Fire. So if Acre thinks it should care about it, it will do this. And that's all there is to say. Thank you very much.